Well, the former Prime Minister, Liz Truss, don't think her successor will be too keen about it, was speaking yesterday and she raised concern about the UK government's pursuit of net zero emissions by 2050. This is what she had to say.
We should, as many other Western countries are already doing, delay implementing net zero commitments, such as the ban on new petrol and diesel vehicles from 2030. Other environmental regulations, which are hiking the cost of living, like enforcing the replacement of gas and oil boilers, should also be abandoned.
So does Liz Truss have a point? Does net zero cost us all too much? To discuss this, we are joined by Senior Lecturer in Climate Change, John Grant, and meteorologist Jim Dale. Gentlemen, great to see you both regulars on this show. John, let me start with you. What do you make of it? Does your heart sink when you hear Liz Truss saying we need to delay net zero?
Yeah, I'm laughing, but I'm not really. This is classic current government of short-term gain for long-term pain. We know that investment in zero carbon in this strategy will eventually give us a payback for that investment. This is not a cost. This is an investment in the future. And here's the thing, that not investing is actually doing something. And by not investing, the costs associated with that are going to be significantly higher than the investments that zero carbon requires. So we're literally punishing the very people that we're trying to protect here, the most vulnerable, the poorest, the old, the young, in this ridiculous sort of idea that moving over to an electric-only economy produced by green electricity.
The problem, though, John, when you say that who we're trying to protect are the poorest in society, Jim, those are the ones who are having to pay this short-term cost in terms of bills and go on, John. Before I bring Jim in, John, come back to me on that, because surely it's those who are struggling to pay for their fuel bills at the moment are the ones that we're worried about.
Absolutely. I can't say this often enough, that it is the fact that our current government have left these people swinging out there in the wind, if only we were using it for power, and they, rather than being supported, we have the potential to invest in our homes. I think we had this conversation last time I was on.
Oh, yeah.
That, insulating people's homes actually has a payback that you can pay for in the money you save by insulating people's homes. This is a no-brainer, and it's being weaponized by people being funded by the oil and gas industry to say it's a cost, when actually it requires government support. There is no doubt that we can't just ask people to transition, but it's better to support people to improve their homes than to give them 400 quid to give to some nameless energy company abroad, which is just crazy, yeah?
Okay. Let's bring Jim Dale in about a specific point Liz Truss made yesterday, Jim. She talked about the lifting she wants the ban on oil and gas boilers. They've got to go by 2026 to be lifted, which means presumably replacing them with a hydrogen alternative. Is the technology anywhere near ready for that? And how much is a hydrogen boiler going to cost the average family?
Well, I'm not an expert in terms of hydrogen boilers or any other sort of boilers. But first of all, I would say John's got tremendous zeal. You introduced us earlier on in your programme as being zealots in terms of our direction of travel. Zealots means zeal, it means passion. I think we've both got that passion for doing the right thing. And John's actually laid a great foundation in terms of where we're going with this. I think the actual mechanics of how we get there in terms of some of the costs of, you mentioned boilers, hydrogen boilers or other boilers and what have you. I think that will evolve with time, just like any.
But Jim, let me interrupt you, Jim. We've only got 3 years. Jim, we've only got 3 years, and I think you're going to find these boilers currently would be about £16,000, £17,000. Average families can't pay that.
Yeah, I'm not saying. Look, I think things will evolve. We'll get a new government. Look, Truss has said this yesterday, and to be honest with you, she lasted less than a week virtually in a prime minister. So I don't think we take any view from Ms Truss whatsoever in terms of this. One thing I will say is having this conversation on GB News is absolutely fantastic. This is where it should be. I really want to broaden this out, maybe even bring some opposers in occasionally. this is the right direction that we talk about this. Andrew, you're right in terms of highlighting some of the problems going forward, but those are the practical, maybe some political problems that we have to resolve. In terms of the meteorology, the climatology, that is set in stone. It's going in one direction. Have a look at Derna in Libya in the previous few weeks, and Maui before that. These things are happening all around us. There is an absolute necessity to move forward at pace.
So John, I need a new boiler at home now. It's not working. What do I do? Because I've looked into air source heat pumps. I've looked into it. They're enormous. I've got no space for it. And they're cripplingly expensive at the moment. And apparently they don't do a very good job in the winter anyway. How should I heat my home to protect the planet?
Well, the first thing you do is, as we've discussed, is make your home as energy efficient with insulation as possible.
It's a 1930 semi. It's really hard to insulate.
I've got an answer for the rest. I've got some really good news. Because there are these hundreds of thousands of heat pumps planned to be installed, factory Octopus Energy is building a factory. I was listening in on their conference the other day, and they are producing a high heat pump that they're claiming that is going to be $5,000 install.
Is it going to work?
So we are looking at it.
Is it going to work?
Yes.
And how quickly? How quickly, John?
I mean, there is a profit.
Is it going to be ready by 2026?
To make this work.
Is it going to be ready by 2026?
Well, they claim they are already ready, but we have no support. This is a future that is. It's so positive. You put 1 unit of electricity in and you can get 3 units of heat out if you've got a well-designed home. It's like magic, but it isn't magic. Hydrogen for domestic heating is a bit of a red herring, personally, I think. But there's huge opportunities here. And yes, the old heat pumps, there is a lot of charlatans who always do this. People think, oh, yeah, let's install them. And they were installed in a rubbish way. And, it is more challenging, a bit like all new technology. You have to know what you're talking about. And there are a lot of dodgy heating engineers out there who just installed them and they were rubbish.
Go on, Jim.
Right.
History dictates technology always advances more quickly with time. We always have the doubts about mobile phones, about electric cars, going back about televisions. Can we turn from black and white to colour? And how fast is that going to happen? There's always been questions ahead of it happening. And it just one of the positives of climate change is that man and technology will move that little bit quicker and faster in order that we actually get to where we need to get to. So I would expect, and I agree with John in this, in terms of the fact that this will unravel a lot faster than what we actually think at this moment in time.
But it is around the corner. And what Liz Truss is saying, shouldn't we just delay it? Shouldn't we just delay this deadline?
She said to ban it. She actually said to throw it out, not to delay it. I mean, the idea of installing heat pumps into the houses that were suitable, which by my research is about 4 out of 10 houses. There are that 6 out of 10 that you can't do immediately. Now, if she said that, I'd have nothing but respect for her. But what she's saying is, let's shelve zero carbon for my lackeys or whatever, and let these people suffer of the climate, which I bow to my colleague here.
That, trying to find an audience.
How harsh this is going to be.
She's trying to find an audience, and that audience doesn't exist. Andrew, I would say to you that there's only one poll that I've seen of late, and I say of late, this is going back to the May elections when people asked when they left the polling booth about net zero, and the results came in, I'm not sure which pollster it was, but 66% in favour of going in the direction of net zero, 20% against.
Let me put a different poll to you. There was a by-election in Uxbridge a few weeks ago. The Tory party fought it squarely and fairly on one issue, the mayor's decision to expand the ultra-low emission zone. And while they lost 2 by-elections on swings of 25-30% in other parts of the country, they held on to that seat because there was a massive rejection of the ultra-low emission zone, which is seen not as to do with saving the environment, but it's just another way by a politician to raise money on the back of families that are really struggling.
I live next door to Uxbridge. I know it quite well, in actual fact. It's quite gentrified in certain areas. I can understand it's never been won by the Labour Party in the past. The Tories just clung on. And although ULEZ was I would call it a minor reason for voting in that particular area.
No, come on, Jim, it was the reason. Jim, come on, it goes against the grain. They lost 2 by-elections massively that day. They hung on because it was a referendum on ULEZ.
400 votes or something? 400 votes they won by, if that's replicated across the country.
They lost 2 by-elections the same day by 25,000, Jim.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it wasn't a issue.
You said it was a minor issue. Jim, it wasn't. It was the issue.
And other things.
Jim, it was the issue. It was the issue.
Andrew, you've made it into being that issue because that was a handy excuse. Make it absolutely clear. Most people in this country, Uxbridge included, believe that net zero, believe that the greening of this country and moving in that direction, albeit in an evolving way, is the direction that we need to take, given the fact of particularly the last 2 years of climate events.
Let me just ask you, John, did you see the headline yesterday? London Mayor Sadiq Khan, a man who's pushed through ULEZ repeatedly, and yet clocked up 470,000 air miles flying around the world, preaching his green agenda, probably as part of this C40 committee that he's head of with all these mayors all around the world. What does that make you think? Because it makes me think that we little people are going to be the ones that suffer by travelling less, having our 15-minute cities, not being able to use our cars and eat meats. It's not going to affect the likes of Sadiq Khan. Those in power will always have that sort of freedom, won't they?
It's uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. I can't deny it. And the 495 people that voted in the Uxbridge election, so that's only a 248 tipping point there. That isn't an absolute underpinning of the anti-ULEZ. But as I've said on this programme before, ULEZ is all about air quality, not about zero carbon. That's what we were just saying. And I'm uncomfortable with this as being using a stick in the starting point. But we need to move away from cars. You said about the 15-minute city. I've been to 15-minute cities, and they are great places to live. Please don't weaponize it as saying it's a horrible place. You go to Amsterdam and move through their 15-minute cities. They are wonderfully safe. The air quality is good. It is not a bad thing. And, people that need to use cars can use cars.
Is it realistic? Is it realistic, though, yes. John? Is it realistic that, given the landscape, the topology of this country, the urban sprawl of this country, could you see a time in which we have 15-minute cities? And just explain to our audience what they are precisely.
Well, the idea is that all your major services are within 15 minutes using active transport. And the idea that you don't have to, because you're quite right, our infrastructure for the last 50 years, pretty much, maybe as much as 70 years, has been designed with the car in mind. And that has to stop now. People talk about a war on cars. It's not a war on cars. It's a war in favour of people and their health.
It's a war on travel.
With the number of cars, they're harming us. They're harming us.
Well,
all right.
We should remind John, by the way, one of the trips that the mayor took in his plane with his 6 advisors was to Argentina to talk about climate change. Couldn't you have done that on Zoom?
I agree, mate. I'm not here to support Sadiq Khan. Things can be done better, and I would ban flying. Don't get me going.
Ban it what completely? You ban flying completely?
All but for emergency. You should be rationed. You should be rationed.
Well,
right.
Congratulations, John, because that's exactly what's coming down the line. Your dream will be achieved by 2030, but it won't be us lot flying. But the likes of Sadiq Khan and all of those running the world, they will still be flying. Jim Dale, I'm reading Nothing But Whether or Not, your book. I'm reading it at the moment so I can educate myself on this issue. I think it's always very important to do a deep dive. There it is.
Good
Jim
plug.
Dale, John Grant, thank you both so much.